Hello and good morning, or it might be afternoon now. Who knows? Not sure when this will get posted. It's morning when I'm saying it. Anyway, biology students, welcome. Today we're going to cover a wonderful, fun topic that has to do with photosynthesis. It's not exactly photosynthesis. We're more talking about ATP and energy, which is important in photosynthesis. But today it's 4/7. My name's Mr. Ball. Here's my email and ball at steelacademy.edu.org. So we're going to jump over into the book now. And with the book, this is the teacher's edition, which is a little bit smaller. So I'm going to make sure to zoom in real nice for you guys. I'll move some of my stiff. Got my waters I'm moving. My little slides that hopefully I still get to do. Not sure if I will or not. Let's see if we can get in there. All right. So what you just saw there was my whole setup going down. Give me 1 second. I will get that back up and going. Sorry about this hang up. All right. Tighten this puppy up. Hope everyone's having a good week. All right. Now, get set up the right way here. All right. Here we go. Like I said, it's teacher's edition, so I get a little extra stuff for you. But you will actually see all the info in your book. It should be in your packets that you picked up in the cab. Anyway, talking about chemical energy, ATP, we studied that a little bit. But basically, animals and plants, they both need energy. Just makes sense. They need to move. They need to be able to consume, live, grow, and expel waste. Basically, those are the big needs for everything to exist. It needs to be able to consume water and food. It needs to be able to breathe, whether it's a plant breathing in carbon dioxide or an oxygen breathing in or an animal breathing in oxygen, excuse me. It needs to be able to have the energy to continue to consume and then the energy to also reproduce to make more of its offspring. So, how does that happen? We have to ask ourselves what it uses. So, a big thing is living things, they use chemical fuels. So, one of the most important compounds that cells use to store and release energy, adenosine triphosphate, abbreviated ATP. ATP is all you need to know. ATP is so important. It is one of the most important chemicals in the world. We probably wouldn't exist if it wasn't for it, because the food chain really starts with plants most of the time. So, ATP consists of adenine, 5-carbon sugar called ribose, and 3 phosphate groups. As you'll see, those phosphate groups, they're the key to ATP's ability to store and release energy. Nice having 3 phosphate groups. 3 phosphate groups means 3 times they can release that energy. So adenosine diphosphate, so that di, it's very important. That D instead of the tri, T, only has 2. It's a compound, looks very similar to ATP, except it has 2 phosphate groups instead of 3. Difference is the key to the way in which living things store energy. When a cell has energy available, it can store small amounts of it by adding phosphate groups to ADP molecules. Then it produces that ATP. ADP is kind of like a battery that powers the machinery of the cell. So if it wants to store energy, it'll throw another phosphate group onto ADP. If it wants to use energy, it'll use ATP and use that phosphate group. It's kind of like putting it away for later when it needs it. You ever watch LeBron James play basketball? He never tries his hardest at the earliest, but at the end of the game, if it's go time and winning time, you'll see him really kick it up a notch. That's what this is for. It's like saving your battery. Cells can release the energy stored in ATP by controlled breaking of the chemical bonds between the second and third phosphate groups. Because a cell can add or subtract these phosphate groups, it has an efficient way of storing and releasing energy as needed. Key concept here is very important. Anytime you see these keys, you should know it. We've talked about that in class. You guys know this. You're smart. ATP can easily release and store energy by breaking and reforming the bonds between its phosphate groups. This characteristic of ATP makes it exceptionally useful as a basic energy source for all cells. There you go. So now, going on to using biochemical energy. One way cells use the energy provided by ATP is to carry out active transport. Hey, we know what that is. We went in depth on that. Many cell membranes contain sodium-potassium pumps, membrane proteins that pump sodium ions out of the cell and potassium ions into it. ATP provides the energy to keep this pump working, maintaining a careful, regulated balance of ions on both sides of the cell membrane, maintaining that homeostasis that we talked about. In addition, ATP powers movement, providing the energy for motor proteins that contract muscle and power wave-like movements of the cilia and flagella. Energy from ATP powers the other important events in the cell, including synthesis of proteins and responses to chemical signals at the cell surface. The energy from ATP can even be used to produce light. In fact, the blink of a firefly on a summer night comes from an enzyme that is powered by ATP. ATP is such a useful source of energy that you might think cells would be packed with ATP to get them through the day. But this is not the case. In fact, most cells have only a small amount of ATP to last for a few seconds of activity. Why? Even though ATP is a great molecule for transferring energy, it's not a good one for storing large amounts of energy over the long term. A single molecule of the sugar glucose, for example, stores more than 90 times the energy required to add a phosphate group to ADP to produce ATP. Therefore, more efficient for cells to keep only a small supply of ATP on hand for instantaneous use. Instead, cells can generate ATP from ADP as needed by using the energy in foods like glucose. As you will see, that's exactly what they do. So heterotrophs and autotrophs. We're going to be looking not at a blank piece of paper, that page, sorry about that. Still getting used to this online school thing, so I'm a little slow with some of this stuff. Anyway, heterotrophs. Basically, they are the organisms that obtain food by consuming other living things, are known as heterotrophs. Some heterotrophs get their food by eating plants, such as grass. Other heterotrophs, such as the cheetah, apparently, yeah, there's a picture of the cheetah right there, gets its food from eating other animals. Those other animals probably eat autotrophs, which produce their own. But anyway, still other mushrooms, for example, obtain food by absorbing nutrients from decomposing organisms in the environment. Mushrooms, very delicious. Made some yesterday, put it on a steak for me and my wife's anniversary. Ah, fantastic. Anyway, originally, however, the energy in all food molecules comes from the sun. Plants, algae, some bacteria are able to use light energy from the sun to produce food. Organisms that make their own food, they're called autotrophs. Ultimately, nearly all life on Earth, including ourselves, depends on the ability of autotrophs to capture the energy of the sunlight and store it in the molecules that make up food. The process by which autotrophs use the energy of sunlight to produce high-energy carbs, sugars, and starches that can be used as food is known as photosynthesis. It comes from the Greek words photo, meaning light, and synthesis, meaning putting together. Therefore, photosynthesis meaning using light to put something together. The process of photosynthesis, plants convert the energy of sunlight into chemical energy stored in the bonds of carbohydrates. There you go. There's the secret to life. Use the sun to make ATP. Or we can also store it in glycogen. Glucose, glycogen, same thing. But more or less. Anyway, good job today, guys. Make sure that you comment, like, send me an email to my email. Whatever you want to do. We're taking kind of attendance, so I want to make sure that you guys get credit for the work you're doing. If you're working on it, just shoot me an email. Be like, working on my stuff. You guys have the assessment down here, this 8-1 assessment to do. And I'll see you tomorrow.